Amongst all of the talk of everything that's happening in Washington and of course down in Georgia with the runoffs today and tomorrow, a joint session will meet in Congress. Republicans, senators, congressmen and congresswomen and senators will get together and they're going to meet on the electoral college votes. It sounds like there'll be challenges from both chambers. And while those are two massive stories, we can't take our eye off the ball, what's going on elsewhere around the world. And I'm not just talking about coronavirus, because obviously that's a big deal too. But we've seen an increase in activity in the Middle East, specifically in Iran. And what does that mean for us? What does that mean for a potential new administration coming in and their the way that they choose to handle Middle East and foreign relations? And we had to get our guy, Daniel Davis, U.S. retired senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities, to help us sort this thing out. Danny, good morning to you.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Look, I think there's some alarming things happening in the Middle East, specifically in Iran, where we've seen Iran starting to increase their uranium by it looks like to about 20%, which is far beyond the limits that were laid out in the Iran nuclear deal that we ditched back in 2018, and now we're seeing more and more threats coming out from the region. What are you seeing? And we'll kind of just start there.
Yeah, well, the context is absolutely critical here. There's too many that are characterizing this as something that's coming out of the blue, or just evidence of intransigence on the part of Iran. Like there's no reason for these things. It's just that they're bad characters and all that. But the truth of the matter is that this is the predictable result of our maximum pressure campaign, which is in what I actually call the maximum failure campaign, because all it does is put pressure on Iran, never offers any possibility to relieve the pressure. And so instead of making things better and safer for the United States, it's pushing Iran into a more confrontational and desperate place. And perversely, we could end up spawning the very conflict that we're trying to avoid. So we need to change our strategy so that we can have a better chance to accomplish our strategic objectives of peace in the Middle East, or at least stability. Let me clarify that.
Fair to say that they kind of feel cornered here?
Oh my gosh! I mean, big time they do. And look, and when you look at actually what's happening and what they're saying at the same time, they are screaming out that they want to get back to the provisions and the restrictions that were imposed on the JCPOA. Even with this announcement of the 20%, which, by the way, is still way below 90% required for weapons grade, they say this is reversible and we can turn it back to the requirements of the JCPOA. They're saying as soon as the European Union and the United States and the other signatories just meet our obligations that we're under there. Of course, not the United States, since we pulled out of it. But they said if the Europeans will just meet their obligations financially, then they'll pull back and they'll go back to what it was. So this is a temporary thing that's just crying out for, we just want the fair deal that we negotiated the first time. And, unfortunately, people in Washington don't want to do anything that benefits Iran, no matter what, whether we agree to it or not, whether anyone agreed to it or not. And it's just self-destructive and self-defeating, because it prevents us from having the safer situation that we should have.
There was also love to get your take on the carrier that was slated for redeployment. That's being ordered to stay in the region as well. What do you think about, what are you reading between the tea leaves there?
Yeah, that's also part of a larger situation. I mean, we've had 3 overflights of B-52s within the last few days. As people say, hey, we want to show a muscular response here. We want to show we're not intimidated and all this. And look, we got to be honest about this and say, does anyone really think that we need to send B-52s and leave an aircraft carrier further into the region to show Iran we're serious? Everybody knows that we have the military. We will not hesitate to use it any time if we're ever attacked. But by doing this, it just keeps the pressure on. It literally is maintaining the maximum pressure campaign all the way up to the bitter end of the Trump administration. And, it remains to be seen what the Biden administration will do once they assume office on the 20th. But, right now, all it's doing is keeping tensions higher than they need to be.
Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis with us from Defense Priorities. Danny, the other part of this, of course, and you kind of just touched on it there, with what looks to be the incoming administration in President-elect Biden. What do you expect out of if they're given this situation here, which they would be inheriting it if they do indeed take office? What do you expect out of that administration? We've seen, I think a lot of folks would say that they've been lighter on situations like this as opposed to applying a heavy hand. What would you expect out of a Biden administration here?
Well, I mean, you certainly got to understand that the Vice President Biden was part of the team that negotiated the JCPOA in the first place. So obviously he thought that was a good idea. And look, if you take emotion and politics out of it, and you just look at the bare fundamentals, during the JCPOA, Iran was not reprocessing nuclear fuel. They were hardly doing anything in the area of nefarious activities in the Middle East, and they were abiding by it. I mean, according to the United Nations, according to the U.S. State Department, they were abiding by all of the agreements and staying restricted in their box. And since we got out of it, all of that has changed. So if you're just talking about what has worked and what hasn't, the JCPOA, for all of its flaws, and it did have flaws, it was better than the NOAD agreement we have now. And then, Iran acting in all these crazy ways because their economy is being strangled literally to death, and they're acting out as anyone would in the desperation. So I hope that the Biden administration comes in and says, let's move diplomacy back to the front, and then let's lower the military tensions.
Interesting stuff. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis, always a pleasure to talk to you. Happy New Year, my friend, and we will catch up with you soon.
Thanks to you, too. Thanks for having me on.